My name is May, and I am 68 years old. I never imagined at my age I would be standing in front of a tiny rented apartment starting over. When my son Thomas told me I needed to pay $1,500 monthly rent to continue living in his home, something inside me broke. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife. How could my own son, the boy I had sacrificed everything for, treat me this way? If you are watching this video on your phone, please subscribe and share if you have ever experienced heartbreaking family situations like mine. My story will show you that sometimes walking away is the only path to healing. I spent 40 years as a dedicated nurse at Memorial Hospital, working tirelessly to provide for my two children, Thomas and Emma, after my husband Jack died of cancer when they were just 8 and 6. Those early years were a blur of double shifts, missed school plays, and falling asleep with textbooks on my chest as I pursued additional certifications to increase my salary. Every extra penny went toward giving my children opportunities I never had. "May you need to take a vacation," my coworkers would tell me as I picked up yet another holiday shift. "Maybe next year?" I would always respond with a tired smile. There was never time for rest when college funds needed filling and growing children needed braces, sports equipment, and eventually college application fees. Thomas showed exceptional intelligence from an early age. His teachers suggested advanced programs, and I worked extra shifts to afford the specialized school that would nurture his talents. All those late nights were worth it when he was accepted to an Ivy League university and then law school. I remember his graduation day standing there in my only good dress watching my son accept his law degree with tears of pride streaming down my face. Emma took a different path. More artistic and free-spirited than her brother, she struggled in traditional schooling but flourished in creative pursuits. She attended a state college for graphic design, and though she never achieved the financial success of her brother, she found fulfillment in her work and her family. As the years passed, Thomas built an impressive career at a prestigious law firm, married Jessica, a marketing executive with family money, and had two beautiful children, Aiden and Sophie, now 10 and 8. They purchased a large house in an exclusive neighborhood with more bathrooms than they could use, and a kitchen that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Emma moved 3 states away after a heated argument with Thomas during our last family Christmas 5 years ago. Something about Thomas criticizing her husband's unstable employment history. The details fade, but the rift remains. She calls weekly but visits rarely, claiming financial constraints with 3 children, and her husband, Arthur's modest teaching salary. I retired 3 years ago at 65, earlier than I had planned, due to increasing arthritis in my hands, making detailed nursing work difficult. My pension provides just over $2,100 monthly, less than I had hoped for, but enough to cover my modest expenses. My retirement savings were significantly depleted after helping both children through college, particularly covering the remainder of Thomas's law school after his partial scholarship. "You will make 10 times this investment when you're a big-shot lawyer," I joked as I wrote the tuition checks, sometimes borrowing against my home equity to make ends meet. "I know, Mom, and I will take care of you when you're old, I promise," Thomas would say, hugging me tightly. 8 months ago, a severe storm hit our area, causing significant damage to my small ranch-style home where I had lived for 30 years. The insurance company only covered a portion of the repairs, citing pre-existing structural issues and my policy limitations. The contractor estimates came in at nearly $80,000, far beyond what I could afford. My home became essentially uninhabitable with roof damage, allowing water to seep in whenever it rained, creating dangerous mold conditions. During a family dinner following this disaster, Thomas surprised me with an offer. "Mom, why don't you move in with us? We have plenty of room and it would be good for the kids to have their grandmother around." Jessica nodded in agreement, though I noticed a slight tightness around her smile. "We have that finished basement space that's just collecting exercise equipment no one uses," she added. "It would be perfect for you with its own bathroom and small sitting area." I hesitated, valuing my independence. "That's very generous, but I wouldn't want to impose." "Nonsense," Thomas insisted. "It's settled. We will help you move next weekend." Looking back, I should have noticed the lack of discussion about how long this arrangement might last or what expectations might come with it. But in my vulnerable state, grateful for a solution to my housing crisis, I accepted what seemed like a lifeline thrown by my successful son. I had no idea that 8 months later, that same lifeline would become a noose tightening around my neck in ways I never could have imagined from my own flesh and blood. The day I moved in, Thomas and Jessica helped carry my belongings, now reduced to what could fit in a basement apartment, into their home. Sophie and Aiden bounced excitedly around me, thrilled to have their grandmother living with them. Thomas had set up the space with my bed, a small television, and a comfortable reading chair. It wasn't home, but it seemed like it could become one. "Thank you both so much for this," I said, hugging them both. "I promise I won't be a burden." "Mom, stop," Thomas said firmly. "You're family. This is what family does." Those words would echo bitterly in my mind in the months to come. At first, everything seemed perfect. I would wake early as I had throughout my nursing career and have coffee ready when the family came downstairs for breakfast. I packed lunches for the children with little notes tucked inside, just as I had done for Thomas and Emma decades earlier. In the afternoons, I would help Aiden and Sophie with their homework, drawing on my years of patience developed while raising my own children. Jessica initially seemed appreciative of my help, especially with meal preparation. I taught Sophie my special recipe for apple pie that had been passed down through generations. "Grandma, this is the best thing I've ever tasted," Sophie exclaimed, her face covered in cinnamon sugar. "Your dad used to say the same thing," I told her, catching Thomas's eye across the kitchen. He smiled momentarily, transforming back into the little boy who once stood on a stool beside me, eager to lick the spoon. But as weeks turned into months, subtle shifts occurred in the household dynamic. Jessica began making comments about all the kitchen clutter when I would bake. Thomas mentioned the increased utility bills. Small rules emerged about when I could use the washer and dryer, what volume was appropriate for television after 9, and how long my showers should be. "We're on a water-saving program," Jessica explained as she suggested I limit showers to 5 minutes. I adapted, always reminding myself that this was their home, not mine. I began spending more time in my basement room, emerging primarily to help with the children or contribute to household chores. I noticed Jessica rearranging the kitchen after I cooked, placing items in different cabinets with small sighs of frustration. One evening, about 6 months into my stay, I came upstairs for a glass of water after everyone had gone to bed. As I approached the kitchen, I heard Thomas and Jessica talking in hushed tones in the adjacent family room. "I just don't know how much longer this can go on," Jessica was saying. "Your mother is sweet, but having her here all the time is a lot." "What am I supposed to do?" Thomas replied, his voice strained. "Put her in a home. She raised me by herself after Dad died." "I'm not saying that," Jessica countered, "but we need some boundaries. The kids are getting too attached, and frankly, our utility bills have gone up at least $300 a month since she moved in." "She doesn't have anywhere else to go right now," Thomas said. "Her house needs extensive repairs that she can't afford." "Maybe she should sell it and get something smaller," Jessica suggested. "Or maybe she needs to contribute financially to this household if this is going to be a permanent arrangement." I tiptoed back downstairs, my thirst, forgotten a lump forming in my throat. Was I really such a burden? I had tried so hard to be helpful, to earn my keep through childcare and housework. That night, I lay awake calculating the monetary value of the cooking, cleaning, and childcare I provided, wondering if it balanced out the cost of my presence. The next morning, I redoubled my efforts to be useful. I deep cleaned the kitchen while everyone was out, reorganized the pantry, and prepared a roast for dinner that had been Thomas's favorite as a child. When Jessica came home, however, her response was tepid. "Oh, you didn't need to do all this, May," she said, surveying the kitchen. "We were actually thinking of ordering pizza tonight, and I had a system for the pantry that made sense for our meal planning." My efforts to add value were being rejected, and I began to feel increasingly unwelcome in a space that wasn't mine, a space I had no power to control or claim. The basement room, intended as my sanctuary, began to feel more like exile. The morning everything changed began like any other. I had been living with Thomas and Jessica for nearly 8 months when they asked me to join them in Thomas's home office for an important discussion. The formality of the request sent a wave of anxiety through me, but I never could have prepared myself for what came next. Thomas sat behind his large mahogany desk, Jessica standing beside him like a united front. I took the chair across from them, suddenly feeling like I was in a performance review rather than a family meeting. "Mom, We need to talk about the living arrangements. Thomas began, his tone professional detached, as if addressing a client rather than his mother. Jessica and I have been discussing the increased costs associated with having another adult in the house. I nodded, my throat already tightening. I understand, and I've been trying to help around the house as much as possible to offset any burden. Jessica cleared her throat. May we appreciate your help with the children and the cooking, but there are significant expenses that housework doesn't cover. Our utility bills have increased substantially. There's additional wear and tear on the house, and the grocery bill has gone up considerably. We've done some calculations. Thomas continued, sliding a paper across the desk toward me. Based on the market rate for a basement apartment in this neighborhood, plus utilities and food, we think $1,500 monthly would be fair. The number hit me like a physical blow. $1,500 out of my $2,100 monthly pension. It would leave me just $600 for all other expenses, medications, car insurance, phone bill, personal items. Thomas, I managed my voice barely above a whisper. That's almost 75% of my monthly income. He shrugged slightly, an expression I recognized from his teenage years when he thought I was being unreasonable. It's actually below market rate for this area, Mom. A one-bedroom apartment around here would run you at least $2,000 plus utilities. But I'm not a tenant, I said, still struggling to process what was happening. I'm your mother. Jessica jumped in, her voice softening in a way that somehow made her words cut even deeper. Of course your family may, but you can't expect to live here indefinitely without contributing financially. We have our own future to consider, college funds for the children, our retirement. You can't stay here forever without paying something, Thomas added. It's not realistic. Forever. The word echoed in my mind. Had I ever suggested this was permanent? Had I not repeatedly expressed that I was looking for solutions for my house, saving whatever I could toward repairs? I've been contributing, I said, my voice growing stronger with indignation. I cook, I clean, I watch the children after school so you don't have to pay for childcare. Thomas waved his hand dismissively. That's helpful, but it doesn't cover the actual costs. Maybe you could get a part-time job if your pension isn't enough. The bookstore in town is hiring, or the pharmacy needs greeters. I stared at my son, this successful man in his expensive shirt and designer glasses, suggesting his 68-year-old mother with arthritis should get a job as a greeter to pay him rent. The boy who had promised to take care of me when he made it big. The child I had skipped meals for when money was tight. The teenager whose law school I helped fund by selling my wedding ring after the scholarship fell short. We're not trying to be harsh, Jessica added, misinterpreting my silence. But we have financial responsibilities to our children. We can't subsidize another household indefinitely. Another household. As if I were some distant relative rather than the woman who had given birth to the man sitting across from me. How long have you been thinking about this? I asked quietly. Thomas and Jessica exchanged glances. A few months, he admitted. We wanted to give you time to settle in before bringing it up. I see, I said, though I didn't see at all, how my presence in their spacious 5-bedroom home could possibly be such a financial strain remained beyond my comprehension. Why don't you take some time to think about it? Thomas suggested, his tone indicating the discussion was concluded. Let us know your decision by next week. I nodded, numbly, rose from the chair, and walked back to my basement room on legs that felt disconnected from my body. Only when the door closed behind me did the tears finally come, hot and bitter, streaming down my face as I muffled my sobs with a pillow so the children wouldn't hear their grandmother breaking apart. Alone in my basement room, I sat on the edge of the bed, still clutching the paper Thomas had given me with his calculations. The neat columns of numbers blurred through my tears as the full weight of what had just happened crashed over me in waves. My own son had essentially told me I was a financial burden. The same child I had sacrificed everything for now viewed me as a liability on a balance sheet. The betrayal cut so deep I could barely breathe around it. I thought back to the countless nights I had worked double shifts at the hospital, coming home exhausted, only to help Thomas with his homework. I remembered the Christmas when both children had asked for expensive, trendy toys, and I had taken an additional weekend job at a department store to make their wishes come true. I recalled Thomas's law school graduation, how proudly I had stood there despite being bone tired from picking up extra shifts to help with his final semester's expenses. One memory in particular surfaced with painful clarity. When Thomas was in his final year of law school, his partial scholarship was reduced unexpectedly. He called me in a panic, facing the possibility of not being able to complete his degree so close to the finish line. "Mom, I don't know what to do," he had said, his voice cracking. "I'm so close, but I need $8,000 that I just don't have." I had already depleted most of my savings helping him through the previous years. But I still had one valuable thing left: the diamond wedding ring Jack had given me 25 years earlier. I sold it to a jeweler, accepting less than its true worth for the quick cash. "Where did you get the money?" Thomas had asked when I called to tell him I could cover the shortfall. "Don't worry about that," I told him. "Just focus on finishing strong." He had been so grateful then, promising through tears, "Mom, I swear when I'm established you'll never have to worry about money again. I'll take care of you the way you've always taken care of me." Where was that son now? The one who recognized my sacrifices. How had he transformed into this stranger who could look me in the eye and suggest I pay him $1,500 a month to live in his basement? I picked up my phone and called the one person who might understand my daughter Emma. "He did what?" Emma exclaimed when I explained the situation, her voice sharp with disbelief. "Mom, that's ridiculous. You should be living with him for free considering everything you've done." "I don't know what to do," I admitted, my voice small. "I can't afford to pay that much and still cover my other expenses, but I have nowhere else to go right now." Emma sighed heavily. "I wish I could offer you a place here, Mom, but we're already cramped in our 3-bedroom with the kids, and Arthur's teaching salary barely covers our expenses as it is." "I know, sweetheart, I wouldn't expect that. This is exactly why I can't stand to be around Thomas anymore." Emma continued, anger evident in her voice. "He and Jessica live in that massive house with more money than they know what to do with, but somehow they can't help their own mother without charging rent. It's disgusting." Her outrage was validating, but it didn't solve my immediate problem. After we hung up, I spent a sleepless night weighing my options. I could try to pay what Thomas was asking, but that would leave me with barely enough for my medications and other necessities. I could attempt to negotiate a lower amount, though the coldness in his eyes suggested little room for compromise. Or I could leave, but where would I go? The next morning, I pulled out my bank statements and began a detailed accounting of my finances. My pension, $2,100 monthly. My medications for hypertension, cholesterol, and arthritis, $320 monthly, even with Medicare. Car insurance, $115. Cell phone, $60. That left about $1,600 for everything else, including food and any emergency expenses. If I paid Thomas $1,500, I would have just $100 left after my fixed expenses. It wasn't just financially impossible, it was emotionally untenable. Every time I would hand over that money, I would be reminded that my own son saw me as a tenant rather than family. Every meal in their kitchen would feel like a transaction rather than a gathering. Every interaction would be colored by the knowledge that my presence had been reduced to a financial arrangement. By dawn, after a night of tears and calculations, I had reached the only conclusion that preserved both my financial survival and my dignity. I would have to leave. I couldn't pay what they were asking, and I wouldn't stay where I wasn't truly welcome. Somehow, I would find another way. The decision to leave was one thing. Figuring out where to go was another challenge entirely. I spent the next few days searching online for affordable housing options while pretending everything was normal around Thomas and Jessica. I smiled through breakfast preparations, helped the children with homework, and kept up all my usual routines while secretly planning my escape. The rental market was discouraging. Most apartments in decent areas started at around $1,200, which would still strain my budget significantly. Expanding my search to areas further from the city center, I finally found a small 1-bedroom apartment in an older complex about 30 minutes away. At $850 monthly, it was the best option I could find, though the neighborhood wasn't as safe as I would have liked. I called the property manager immediately and arranged to see the apartment that afternoon, while Thomas and Jessica were at work and the children at school. The complex was dated but clean, with mostly elderly residents from what I could tell. The unit itself was tiny, about a third the size of my old house, with a galley kitchen, a living room barely large enough for a small sofa, and a bedroom that could fit little more than a double bed and dresser. But it had a small balcony where I could put flower pots, and most importantly, it was mine. "I'll take it," I told the manager without hesitation. When she mentioned I needed first and last month's rent, plus a security deposit totaling over $2,500, my heart sank. "Is there any flexibility on the deposit?" I asked. "I'm on a fixed income." She shook her head sympathetically. "I'm sorry, but it's company policy. We need the full amount before you can move in." I drove back to Thomas's house, my mind racing with calculations. My checking account held just over $1,000, and my emergency savings had dwindled to about $800 after helping with Emma's son's emergency dental surgery last year. I was still about $700 short. Back in my basement room, I took inventory of my remaining possessions. The pearl necklace Jack had given me for our 10th anniversary. The antique silver serving set that had belonged to my grandmother. A small collection of vintage Hummel figurines I had gathered over decades. None were particularly valuable on their own, but together they might bridge the gap. I called Susan, my friend from my nursing days, who lived about 40 minutes away. "I need a huge favor," I said after explaining the situation. "May, that's awful," she said. "Of course I'll help. Arthur and I can come with our truck this Saturday." "Thomas and Jessica have a charity event that day," I told her. "They'll be gone from 10 to 4. Can you come at 11? "We'll be there," she promised. "And May, you can stay with us if you need to." Her offer brought fresh tears to my eyes. "Thank you, but I've found a place. I just need help moving." The next day, I visited 3 different pawn shops and a consignment store, selling my jewelry, silver, and figurines. The process was painful, watching these treasured mementos of my life being assessed for monetary value, but I kept reminding myself that they were just things. My dignity was worth more. By Friday, I had assembled the full amount needed for the apartment. I signed the lease that afternoon and received the keys, though I wouldn't move in until Saturday. That evening at dinner, Thomas mentioned the charity gala they would be attending the next day. "Mom, you'll be okay with the kids, right?" he asked, not looking up from his phone. "Actually, Sophie has a play date at Maddie's house, and Aiden is going to his basketball team pizza party," Jessica interjected. "The parents are handling transportation both ways." Thomas nodded. "Even better. You'll have the day to yourself, Mom." If only they knew. That night, I quietly packed my remaining possessions. Clothes into suitcases, books and photo albums into boxes I had collected from the grocery store, personal items into tote bags. I worked silently, careful not to alert anyone to my activities. I wrote a brief note that I would leave on the kitchen counter. "Thank you for letting me stay these past months. I found a place of my own. I love you and the children. Mom." No accusations, no guilt trips, just a simple statement of fact. Saturday morning arrived with a knot of anxiety and determination in my stomach. I hugged Sophie and Aiden extra tight before they left for their activities, wondering when I would see them next. "Why are you squeezing so hard, Grandma?" Aiden asked with a laugh. "Because I love you so much," I told him, memorizing the feeling of his small body in my arms. After Thomas and Jessica departed in their formal attire, I texted Susan that the coast was clear. She and Arthur arrived 40 minutes later with their pickup truck expressions of concern and support on their faces. "Are you sure about this?" Susan asked as she helped me carry a box to the truck. "I don't have a choice," I replied. "I can't pay what they're asking, and I won't be treated like a burden in my son's home." Loading took less than 2 hours my life, now reduced to what could fit in the back of a pickup truck and my small sedan. I placed the note on the kitchen counter, took one last look around the house where I had lived for the past 8 months, and closed the door behind me. As I drove away following Susan and Arthur, a complex mixture of emotions washed over me. Sadness that it had come to this, anger at my son's callousness, fear about my uncertain future, but beneath it all, a surprising undercurrent of pride. At 68 years old, I was starting over rather than accepting terms that diminished my worth. There was strength in that choice, even through the heartbreak. My new apartment was on the 2nd floor, and moving in took several trips up and down the stairs, taxing my arthritic knees. But by late afternoon, all my belongings were inside. Susan and Arthur helped me arrange the furniture, set up my bed, and unpack the kitchen essentials. "It's cozy," Susan said kindly, though I could tell she was trying to find something positive to say about the small, dated space. "It's mine," I replied, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. "No one can tell me how long I can shower or what I owe them for existing here." Susan hugged me tightly before they left. "Call me anytime, day or night, and come for dinner tomorrow. No arguments." After they drove away, I stood in the center of my new living room, surrounded by boxes and unfamiliar walls. The magnitude of what I had done began to sink in. I had walked away from my son's home without a proper goodbye. I had chosen this tiny apartment over his spacious house. I had embraced uncertainty over security that came with conditions I couldn't accept. Had I done the right thing? Or had pride driven me to an impulsive decision I would regret? Only time would tell, but as I hung my few remaining photographs on the wall, including one of Thomas and Emma as children with their arms around each other, I felt a glimmer of peace amidst the turmoil. Whatever happened next, I had stood up for my worth. After a lifetime of putting my children first, I had finally chosen myself. The first night in my new apartment was eerily quiet. No sounds of children running overhead, no television from the family room, no hushed conversations between Thomas and Jessica, just the occasional footsteps from the upstairs neighbor and the distant hum of traffic. I slept fitfully, waking several times disoriented and reaching for a light switch that wasn't where it should be. By morning, my phone had accumulated a staggering 35 missed calls and 17 text messages. Thomas had apparently returned home early from the charity event and discovered my note. His first few messages expressed confusion. "Mom, where are you? What does your note mean?" These quickly escalated to concern. "Please call me back. We're worried about you." And finally, anger. "I can't believe you would just leave without talking to us. The kids are upset. This is incredibly irresponsible." Jessica had called several times as well, leaving voicemails that managed to sound both concerned and accusatory. "May, this is extremely inconsiderate. The children came home expecting to see their grandmother. How could you just disappear without saying goodbye to them?" Thomas is beside himself. Even Aiden and Sophie had called from their father's phone, their small voices breaking my heart. "Grandma, where did you go? Daddy says you moved away. Why didn't you say goodbye? Please come back, Grandma. I want to show you my new drawing." Each message twisted the knife deeper, especially those from my grandchildren. I had never wanted to hurt them, had never intended for my departure to affect them so deeply. But I couldn't help wondering, where was this concern for my feelings when Thomas and Jessica had sat me down and told me I needed to pay $1,500 to continue living in their home. I texted Thomas a brief response. "I'm safe. I found an apartment I can afford. I needed to do this for myself. I'll call later when things calm down." Then I set about trying to make my new place feel like home. I unpacked boxes, arranged my few pieces of furniture, and placed my remaining photographs around the room. On the small balcony, I set up 2 potted geraniums I had purchased at the grocery store, a splash of color against the gray exterior. That afternoon, I ventured out to explore my new neighborhood. There was a small library within walking distance, a grocery store about a half-mile away, and a community center that advertised activities for seniors. As I walked, I noticed a Help Wanted sign in the window of a small bookstore. On impulse, I went inside. The store was warm and inviting, with floor-to-ceiling shelves and the comforting smell of paper and binding glue. An older man with wire-rimmed glasses looked up from the counter. "Can I help you?" "I noticed your sign," I said. "Are you still looking for help?" He looked me over appraisingly. "Part-time, 15 hours a week, mostly afternoons and some weekends. Involves standing shelving books and working the register. Think you'd be up for that?" I nodded. "I was a nurse for 40 years. I can handle standing and dealing with people." He smiled. "A nurse? Perfect. We get a lot of elderly customers who sometimes need a patient ear more than a book recommendation. When can you start?" Just like that. I had a job. Not because I needed to pay my son $1,500 in rent, but because I wanted to be part of something to contribute to build a new life in this unfamiliar place. I would start the following Monday, working Monday, Wednesday, and Friday afternoons, plus every other Saturday. When I returned to my apartment, I found a small potted plant outside my door with a card that read, "Welcome to the building. I'm in 3C if you need anything. Barbara." This simple act of neighborliness brought tears to my eyes. A stranger had shown me more immediate kindness than my own son had in our final months together. By evening, Thomas was calling again. This time, I answered. "Where are you?" he demanded without preamble, his voice a mixture of anger and what sounded like genuine worry. "I'm in an apartment on Lakeside Drive," I replied calmly. "Lakeside? That's not even a good neighborhood," he exclaimed. "Mom, what were you thinking just disappearing like that?" "I was thinking I couldn't afford to pay you $1,500 a month and still have enough to live on," I said, keeping my voice level. "And I didn't want to be somewhere I was seen as a financial burden." "We could have discussed it," he argued. "You didn't have to just leave without saying anything." "Like, you discussed it with me before deciding I needed to pay rent," I countered. "Thomas, you presented it as a decision already made. What was there to discuss?" He fell silent for a moment. "The kids are really upset," he finally said, his voice softer. "Sophie cried herself to sleep last night." The guilt hit me hard. "I'm sorry about that. I never wanted to hurt them. Would it be possible for me to see them soon?" "I don't know, Mom. Jessica is pretty angry. She says you were deliberately hurtful leaving while we were out." I bit back a retort about how hurtful their rent demand had been. Instead, I said, "I understand she's upset, but they're my grandchildren and I love them very much. Please don't use them to punish me for making a decision about my own life." After another tense silence, Thomas sighed. "Where exactly are you living? I want to see this place." I gave him my address, and he said he would come by the next day. After we hung up, I sat looking around my small apartment, suddenly seeing it through Thomas's eyes. The outdated kitchen cabinets, the worn carpet, the water stain on the bathroom ceiling. Would he use these deficiencies as evidence that I had made a poor decision? Would he try to convince me to return to his basement on his terms? I straightened up as best I could and reminded myself why I had left. This apartment might not be impressive, but it was what I could honestly afford. It was a place where I could live with dignity, rather than as a charity case with a $1,500 monthly fee attached. The next day, Sunday, Thomas arrived alone, his luxury SUV looking out of place in the apartment complex parking lot. When I opened the door, his eyes widened as he took in the small space. "This is where you're living now?" he asked incredulously, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "Yes," I replied simply. "It's what I can afford on my pension." He walked through the apartment quickly, his expression growing increasingly concerned. "Mom, the security in this building is minimal at best. That lock on your door wouldn't keep out a determined teenager. And I saw some questionable characters hanging around the building next door." "It's what I can afford, Thomas," I repeated. "The alternative was paying you $1,500 a month and having essentially nothing left over." He had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "We could have negotiated the amount. Jessica and I just thought it was fair to ask for some contribution." "Some contribution is reasonable," I agreed. 75% of my income is not." He sank onto my small sofa, running a hand through his hair in a gesture so reminiscent of his father that it made my heart ache. "Why didn't you just talk to us instead of sneaking away?" "Would it have made a difference?" I asked quietly. "The night before you made your proposal, I overheard you and Jessica discussing what a burden I was, how the children were getting too attached, how much your utilities had increased. It was clear you wanted me gone, or at the very least paying significant rent." His face flushed. "You weren't supposed to hear that." "But I did. And it hurt deeply, Thomas. After everything I sacrificed to give you opportunities in life, to hear you discuss me as if I were a problematic tenant, rather than your mother, was devastating." "Mom, that's not fair. We took you in when you needed help." "You did," I acknowledged. "And I'm grateful for that. But you also knew my financial situation. You knew what my pension was. Asking for $1,500 monthly wasn't realistic, and deep down you must have known that." He was quiet for a long moment, looking around the apartment again. "The kids miss you," he finally said. "They keep asking when Grandma is coming home." "I miss them too terribly, but this is my home now. I'd love to have them visit or to see them at your house sometimes." Thomas nodded slowly. "I'll talk to Jessica. She's still pretty upset about how you left." "I understand," I said, though part of me wanted to ask why Jessica's feelings deserved more consideration than mine had received. Please tell Sophie and Aiden that I love them very much and I hope to see them soon. After he left, I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea watching the activity in the parking lot below. An elderly couple walking hand in hand, a young mother struggling with groceries and a toddler, a middle-aged man walking a small dog. All of us living our lives in this modest building, making do with what we had, finding dignity and independence rather than luxury with strings attached. For the first time since leaving Thomas's home, I felt certain I had made the right decision. Difficult as it was, painful as the separation from my grandchildren might be, I had chosen self-respect over conditional charity, and somehow I would find my way forward from here. The days turned into weeks as I settled into my new routine. Each morning I would have coffee on my small balcony, watching the neighborhood come to life. 3 days a week I worked at Riverside Books, arranging displays, helping customers find their next great read, and operating the ancient cash register that frequently needed a firm tap to open. "You're a natural at this, May," George, the owner, often commented as he observed me chatting with customers. I found unexpected joy in recommending books based on my lifetime of reading, particularly to the elderly patrons who would often linger to discuss their favorites. Many became regulars who would stop by just to talk, even when they didn't need a new book. "You should start a reading group," George suggested one quiet afternoon. "For seniors, we could host it in the back room on Tuesdays." The idea took root, and soon I was leading a weekly discussion with 8 to 10 participants, mostly retirees like myself looking for connection and intellectual stimulation. We became fast friends, often continuing our conversations at the diner down the street after the store closed. Meanwhile, my relationship with Thomas remained strained. He brought the children to visit 2 weeks after his initial inspection of my apartment, but the visit was awkward and brief. Jessica remained conspicuously absent, sending her regards, but always having some commitment that prevented her from coming along. "When are you coming back to our house, Grandma?" Sophie asked during that first visit, her small face serious. "I'm not coming back to live there, sweetheart," I explained gently. "But I hope you can visit me here often, and maybe sometimes I can come see you." "But why?" she persisted. "Don't you love us anymore?" "Of course I love you," I assured her, pulling her onto my lap despite the protest from my arthritic knees. "More than anything in the world. But grown-ups sometimes need their own homes just like you need your own room." She seemed to accept this explanation, but Aiden remained quiet and withdrawn during the visit, barely engaging with me. When I tried to hug him goodbye, he turned away slightly, a gesture that broke my heart. "He'll come around," Thomas said as they were leaving. "He just doesn't understand." After they left, I cried for the first time since moving in, mourning the easy relationship I had once had with my grandchildren and wondering if it could ever be repaired. The following week, something unexpected happened. Emma called to say she and her family were driving through town on their way to a vacation and wanted to visit. It had been nearly 2 years since I had seen my daughter and her children in person, our relationship maintained primarily through weekly phone calls and occasional video chats. "I heard what Thomas did," she said, when they arrived, hugging me tightly in my small living room. "Arthur and I are furious with him." Her husband Arthur nodded in agreement. "Charging your own mother rent is bad enough, but $1,500. That's just wrong." Their 3 children, teenagers now and taller than I remembered, looked around my apartment curiously but without the judgment I had seen in Thomas's eyes. "It's small, but it's cozy," my 16-year-old granddaughter Lily said kindly. "And I love your flower pots on the balcony." We spent a wonderful afternoon together, crowded around my small table for lunch, then walking to the nearby park. Emma and Arthur insisted on taking me grocery shopping before they left, filling my cart despite my protests. "We want to help Mom," Emma said firmly. "Let us do this." As they were preparing to continue their journey, Emma pressed an envelope into my hand. "Just a little something to help with expenses," she said. "It's not much, but we want you to know we support you." Later, I found $500 in the envelope along with a note, "For emergencies or something special for yourself. Love, Emma, Arthur, and kids." I called her immediately. "Emma, this is too generous. I know you don't have extra money to spare." "Mom, stop," she said firmly. You helped me through college, supported me when I was a single mom for those 2 years before I met Arthur, and have always been there for us. Let us help you now, even in this small way." Her support lifted my spirits immensely. Though one child seemed to have forgotten all I had done for him, the other had not. It was a powerful reminder that I was still valued, still loved, still worthy of respect. A few days later, I received an unexpected visitor at the bookstore. Jessica appeared at the counter looking uncomfortable and out of place in her designer clothes amid the dusty shelves. "May," she said stiffly, "do you have a moment to talk?" George nodded at me to go ahead, and I led Jessica to the small break room in the back. "Thomas doesn't know I'm here," she began once we were seated at the small table. "But the children are miserable without you, and frankly, things aren't going well at home." I waited silently, unsure where this was heading. "Since you left, Thomas has been distant, snapping at me and the kids. Last night he slept in the guest room after we had a huge fight about you." She sighed heavily. "I think he feels guilty, but he's too proud to admit it." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said carefully, "but I don't see what I can do about it. I can't afford what you were asking, and I won't be treated as a burden." Jessica fidgeted with her wedding ring. "The thing is, May, I was the one who pushed for the rent. Thomas wasn't completely comfortable with it, but I convinced him it was the right thing to do." This admission surprised me. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because everything's falling apart," she admitted. "Thomas is unhappy, the kids are constantly asking for you, and even I miss your help with them." She paused. "I was wondering if you would consider moving back. We could work out something more reasonable for rent." I studied her face, noting the calculation still present beneath the veneer of reconciliation. This wasn't about missing me or regretting their actions. It was about restoring harmony to her home and regaining convenient childcare. "Thank you for the offer," I said carefully, "but I've made a life for myself here now. I have a job, I enjoy friends in the building, and my reading group. I'm not interested in giving that up." Her expression hardened slightly. "Is this about punishing Thomas or me?" "No," I replied honestly. "It's about respecting myself enough not to go where I'm valued primarily for my utility rather than who I am. I'm Thomas's mother, not a tenant or a nanny." Jessica stood up abruptly. "Fine. I tried, but don't expect Thomas to keep bringing the kids here. This neighborhood isn't really suitable for children anyway." The threat was clear reconciliation on her terms, or limited access to my grandchildren. After she left, I leaned against the shelves, trying to steady my breathing. The prospect of seeing less of Sophie and Aiden was painful, but I couldn't allow myself to be manipulated by that fear. Somehow, I would find a way to maintain my relationship with them while preserving my independence and dignity. That evening, I shared the encounter with my reading group friends during our weekly dinner at the diner. "Sounds like they're realizing just how much you did for them," Barbara from 3C commented. "Free childcare isn't so easily replaced." "You did the right thing standing your ground," added Howard, a retired history professor who had become a close friend. "They were trying to take advantage of you before, and they're trying a different approach now, but the intent is the same." Their support strengthened my resolve. These new friends saw my worth without conditions or expectations. They appreciated my company simply for who I was, not what I could provide. It was a refreshing change after months of feeling increasingly unwelcome in my son's home. Over the next few weeks, Thomas called less frequently, and as Jessica had threatened, the visits with my grandchildren became more sporadic. When they did come, Thomas would wait in the car, sending the children up to my apartment alone for brief visits. "Daddy says we can only stay for 30 minutes today," Sophie informed me during one such visit. "He has important work to do." I made the most of these limited interactions, playing board games, baking cookies in my tiny kitchen, and creating treasured memories despite the constraints. After each visit, I would stand at my window watching them leave Thomas, barely acknowledging my wave from the balcony. One rainy Tuesday, about 2 months after I had moved out, Thomas appeared at my door unannounced. He was soaking wet, having apparently run from his car without an umbrella. "Mom," he said, his voice breaking slightly, "we need to talk." I invited him in, offering a towel for his dripping hair and a cup of hot tea. He sat at my small kitchen table, looking around with different eyes than during his first visit. Less judgmental, more thoughtful. "Emma called me," he said after a long silence. "She really let me have it. Said I was ungrateful, selfish, and short-sighted. I raised my eyebrows but said nothing. She reminded me about the wedding ring, he continued quietly. How you sold it to help pay for my final semester of law school. I had almost forgotten. You were in the middle of exams, I said. I didn't want you to worry about money. He shook his head. But that's just it, Mom. You've always worried about money, so I wouldn't have to. You've always put me first. He looked up, his eyes meeting mine directly for the first time. And then, when you needed me, I treated you like a financial inconvenience. The admission hung in the air between us, neither accusation nor excuse, simply truth. Jessica and I are separating, he said after another long pause. At least temporarily. She's gone to stay with her sister. Thomas, I'm sorry, I said, genuinely concerned despite everything. What happened? He laughed humorlessly. Many things. But the catalyst was finding receipts showing she'd been spending thousands on online shopping while complaining about the financial burden of having you live with us. When I confronted her, she admitted she never really wanted you there. The rent demand was her idea to make you leave without me having to ask you to go. I absorbed this information silently, remembering Jessica's visit to the bookstore, her admission that the rent had been her idea, but not the full extent of her manipulation. I should have stood up to her, Thomas continued. I knew asking for $1,500 wasn't reasonable. I knew you couldn't afford it. But I went along with it because it was easier than fighting with her. He ran a hand through his still damp hair. I've been a coward and a terrible son. You've been caught between your wife and your mother, I said gently. That's never an easy position. Stop making excuses for me, he said firmly. What I did was wrong. Period. He reached across the table and took my hand. Mom, I'm so sorry. Can you ever forgive me? Looking into the eyes of my only son, I saw genuine remorse and the shadow of the boy I had raised, the one who had once promised to take care of me when he made it big. Despite everything, I loved him deeply. I forgive you, Thomas, I said softly. But forgiving doesn't mean forgetting or going back to the way things were. I've made a life here now, one that I value. He nodded. I understand. I'm not asking you to move back, but I would like to rebuild our relationship if you're willing, and I want the kids to spend more time with you. I would like that very much, I replied. As Thomas was leaving, he handed me an envelope. This isn't charity, he said quickly. It's repayment of a debt long overdue. Inside was a check for $25,000 and a note for the wedding ring and everything else I can never truly repay. All my love, Thomas. I tried to refuse it, but he was adamant. Please, Mom, let me do this one thing right. Use it for repairs on your old house if you want, or save it for emergencies. Just know that it comes with no strings attached. After he left, I sat on my balcony, watching the rain reflecting on the unexpected turn of events. Thomas and I had taken the first step toward reconciliation, though the road ahead would likely be long and sometimes difficult. Jessica and I might never have a warm relationship, but perhaps we could establish a civil one for the sake of the children. Emma had stood up for me from afar, demonstrating a strength and loyalty I had always known she possessed. As for me, I had discovered a resilience I hadn't known I still had. At 68 years old, I had started over, found meaningful work, made new friends, and created a life that was modest but dignified. The apartment might be small, the neighborhood less prestigious than my son's, but every square foot of it was mine, earned through my own efforts rather than bestowed as conditional charity. The rain began to ease, and a patch of blue sky appeared between the clouds. Like that break in the storm, I felt a sense of hope emerging from the turmoil of recent months. Not everything was resolved, not every wound was healed, but I could see a path forward now, one illuminated by self-respect and genuine connection, rather than obligation and resentment. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I would face them with the same determination that had carried me through raising 2 children alone, supporting them through college, and now rebuilding my life in my senior years. Some might see this as a sad chapter in my life, but I was beginning to recognize it as one of empowerment. In walking away from a situation that diminished me, I had reclaimed my worth and reminded both my children and myself of a fundamental truth. Respect cannot be bought or sold, only freely given and rightfully earned. 6 months have passed since I moved into my small apartment, and so much has changed both within me and around me. The journey hasn't been easy, but it has been transformative in ways I never could have imagined when I first closed the door on my son's basement room. The first few weeks were the hardest, filled with doubts and loneliness. There were nights I cried myself to sleep wondering if I had made a terrible mistake, if pride had driven me to an impulsive decision I would regret for the rest of my life. But gradually, as I established routines and connections in my new community, those doubts began to fade. My job at Riverside Books has become more than just a source of supplemental income. It has become a place of purpose and community. My reading group has expanded to 15 regular members, and we've even had a few articles written about us in the local newspaper. Seniors, finding connection through literature. Read one headline, accompanied by a photo of all of us laughing during a particularly spirited discussion about a mystery novel. "You've brought so much life into this store," George told me recently. "Honestly, business is up nearly 20% since you started the reading group." He's increased my hours and given me responsibility for ordering books in certain genres, a task I approach with meticulous care and genuine enthusiasm. At 68, I never expected to find a new career, but that's essentially what has happened. Thomas and Jessica ultimately decided to divorce a process that is still ongoing and sometimes contentious. While I never wished for their marriage to end, I cannot deny that Thomas seems lighter, more like his true self since they separated. He has apologized multiple times for his behavior, each time seeming to understand more deeply the pain he caused. "I was so caught up in Jessica's world and appearing successful and affluent that I lost sight of the values you raised me with," he admitted during a recent lunch. "I became someone I don't particularly like." The children spend alternate weeks with each parent, and Thomas makes a point of bringing them to see me during his weeks. We've established a Sunday tradition of baking cookies together in my tiny kitchen, with flour inevitably covering every surface by the time we're done. These simple moments of connection have healed much of the hurt from our earlier estrangement. Jessica and I maintain a cordial if distant relationship. When she drops the children off occasionally, we exchange polite greetings, but little more. I've made peace with the fact that we may never be close, focusing instead on ensuring the children don't feel caught in the middle of adult tensions. Emma has become more present in my life as well, calling more frequently and making an effort to visit at least once every 2 months despite the distance. During her last visit, she mentioned something that touched me deeply. "You know, Mom, standing up to Thomas and Jessica the way you did has changed how I see you," she said as we walked through the park near my apartment. "I always knew you were strong, raising us alone and everything, but seeing you refuse to be devalued at this stage of your life, even by your own son, that was powerful." Her words made me realize that my actions had ripple effects I hadn't considered. By refusing to accept treatment that diminished my worth, I was modeling self-respect, not just for my grandchildren, but for my adult daughter as well. The most significant change, however, has been within me. I've discovered a capacity for renewal that I didn't know I possessed, at an age when many of my contemporaries are settling into established patterns. I've created an entirely new life. I've made friends who value me for who I am, not what I can provide. I've found work that engages my mind and feeds my soul. I've established a home that, while modest, is entirely my own. Recently, I used part of the money Thomas gave me to begin repairs on my original house. It won't be ready for many months yet, and I'm not certain I'll move back when it is. This apartment, initially a desperate solution to an immediate problem, has become a place of growth and independence. Whatever I decide, the choice will be mine, made from a position of options rather than necessity. Last week, Thomas arrived with the children and something else, the diamond wedding ring I had sold years ago to pay for his final semester of law school. "How did you find it?" I gasped as he placed the familiar band in my palm. "I hired a private investigator," he admitted. "It took months to track down the jeweler who bought it and then the customer who purchased it from them. I paid considerably more than they did to get it back, but that doesn't matter. It belongs with you." As I slipped the ring back onto my finger now as a symbol of my own resilience rather than my marriage, I felt the circle of our family story completing itself in some way. The son who had forgotten his mother's sacrifices had remembered. The mother who had been devalued had reclaimed her worth. My journey continues with challenges still to face and relationships still to heal. There are days when my arthritis makes shelving books at the store nearly impossible, when the climb to my second-floor apartment leaves me breathless when I miss the spaciousness and comfort of my former house. But these difficulties pale in comparison to the peace I've found in standing up for myself. If I could share one lesson from my experience, it would be this. It's never too late to draw boundaries that protect your dignity. It's never too late to expect respect, especially from those who claim to love you. It's never too late to begin again, to find new purpose, to create a life that honors your worth. Sometimes walking away is the only path to healing, and in the walking you discover strength you never knew you had, connections you never expected to make, and a sense of self that no one can diminish unless you allow it. As I look out from my small balcony at the life unfolding below, I feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude, not for material comfort or financial security, but for the precious gift of self-respect. At 68 years old, I finally understand that this is the foundation upon which all other worthwhile things are built. If my story resonates with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice to preserve your dignity? Or have you regretted not standing up for yourself when you should have? Leave a comment below and let me know your thoughts. And if you found value in my journey, please subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and renewal. Remember, it's never too late to demand the respect you deserve, especially from those closest to you. Thank you for listening, and may you find the courage to honor your worth in all your relationships.